Travis Drummond found the puppy on a Tuesday evening in February, behind the Tim Hortons on Memorial Avenue, crouched against the base of the dumpster, with her nose pressed into the corner, where the concrete met the bricks. He brought her home that night, called the shelter in the morning, and heard nothing back. But the next afternoon, when he drove her to the vet clinic on South Cumberland Street, a lean brown dog appeared at the edge of the parking lot, studied the bundle in his arms, and walked east into the beginning of the rain without touching the bowl of food left near the curb. Travis thought she was frightened. He thought the traffic had scared her off. He was wrong. Somewhere past the shuttered warehouse blocks along the waterfront, another puppy was still waiting in the cold, and the truth about why that dog kept leaving would force Travis to risk the one living thing that had quietly, without his permission, begun to matter again. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from, and please subscribe for more stories about loyalty, second chances, and the quiet courage it takes to start over. Cold had settled over Thunder Bay the way it does in February, not dramatically, just completely, pressing itself into every gap in old buildings and every unlit corner of the waterfront. The sleeping giant lay flat across Lake Superior on clear days and disappeared into low cloud on most others. Travis Drummond had been renting a house on Amelia Street for 14 months. He was 47, broad-shouldered, with hair cut short at the sides and pale gray eyes that said very little about what was happening behind them. He'd spent 20 years in Canadian Navy Special Operations and had left the service in 2020 after a medical release that was technically accurate and emotionally incomplete. The real reason was a Belgian Malinois named Hatch. Hatch had been Travis's military working dog for 6 years, fast, precise, loyal to an almost embarrassing degree. In October of 2019, during a training exercise outside Petawawa, Hatch was killed in an accident that happened 20 meters from where Travis was standing. Close enough to hear, not close enough to change anything. He kept Hatch's worn canvas collar in the drawer beside his bed. Most nights he didn't open it, some nights he did. The puppy he found behind the dumpster was a shepherd cross, small enough to fit in one arm, with a white diamond patch on her chest, and one ear that hadn't quite decided to stand up yet. She was 8 weeks old, slightly underweight, and watched Travis the way animals watch when they've decided the world is mostly dangerous. He lowered himself to one knee on the wet pavement and kept his hands visible. He didn't move closer. He waited. She came to him. He named her Pepper because she sneezed into his coffee mug twice on the second morning, with the startled expression of a dog who had not expected that to happen. She chewed the corner of a dish towel and dragged it around the kitchen. She wedged herself under the bathroom vanity and discovered she couldn't turn around, which she handled by barking with great authority until Travis came to sort it out. She fell off the edge of his bed and landed on all 4 feet, with a dignity that suggested she'd meant to do it. The first evening she curled on his boot and fell asleep with her chin across the lace. He sat very still for a long time so as not to wake her. He hadn't done that kind of quiet in a while. He opened the bedside drawer that night and looked at Hatch's collar for the first time in weeks. He didn't take it out. He closed the drawer and went back to the kitchen, where Pepper had relocated to his flannel shirt on the floor, and was asleep again, one paw pressed over the cuff. Dr. Rebecca Nakamura ran the morning clinic at South Cumberland Veterinary and had the measured calm of someone who understood that a frightened animal reads intention before it reads action. She was 36, with dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a braid that reached the collar of her lab coat. She moved around animals the way steady people move, without announcing it. She checked Pepper's ears, eyes, teeth, paws, abdomen, and heartbeat. She scanned her back for a microchip. The scanner read nothing. 7, maybe 8 weeks, she said. Slightly underweight but healthy. Softened kibble for another few weeks. Keep her away from stairs and anything small enough to swallow. Pepper responded to this assessment by climbing into Rebecca's coat pocket as far as she could manage, which was approximately one shoulder and part of her chest. They were walking to Travis's truck when the brown dog appeared. She stood at the far edge of the parking lot, beneath the bare Manitoba maples along the fence line. Lean, mud-marked, amber-eyed. A shepherd mix, maybe 3 years old, with the long legs of a dog that covered ground regularly, and the particular stillness of an animal that had learned to wait without relaxing. Her fur was damp. She'd been out in the weather. Travis stopped. Pepper lifted her head, looked at the dog, and pressed her face into Travis's jacket. She gripped the front of his flannel shirt with one small paw and stayed. He didn't understand it then. If this was Pepper's mother, why was the puppy turning toward him instead of toward her? Rebecca came through the clinic door and stopped beside him. "Give her room," she said quietly. She placed a bowl of food near the edge of the curb and backed away. The brown dog's nostrils worked. Her legs didn't move. Travis carried Pepper to his truck, opened the rear door, spread a blanket, and stepped several yards back. He left a clear path. "No one's going to force you," he said. The dog stepped onto the asphalt. 3 steps. She stopped at the shadow of the truck and looked at Pepper. Then her head turned sharply east, toward the road that ran along the waterfront. For a long moment her weight shifted between 2 directions at once, the truck and whatever was pulling her the other way. She left the food untouched. She walked east to the end of the block, stopped beside the chain-link fence of a closed tire shop, and looked directly back at Travis. The look was deliberate. It lasted long enough that he felt the old instincts stir, the part of him trained to read meaning and posture, to understand messages that couldn't be spoken aloud. She turned the corner and was gone. He followed in the truck, checked 2 alleys, the loading dock behind a vacant warehouse, a stretch of fence running toward the lake. Once he saw a flash of dark fur between 2 parked transport trucks. By the time he'd circled the block, the road was empty. He sat in the truck with the engine idling and Pepper asleep in her basket, and felt the familiar weight of having arrived somewhere half a minute too late. That evening he called Rebecca. He described the untouched food and the way the dog's shoulders had stayed angled toward the truck, while her feet remained ready to carry her in the opposite direction. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "Fear pulls a dog away from everything," she said. That dog was choosing between 2 directions, not running from one. Then what was east? "If Pepper isn't her only puppy," Rebecca said carefully, "then there might be another one still out there, still waiting for her to come back tonight." He printed 2 photographs the next morning at the Shoppers Drug Mart on Algoma Street. Pepper sitting on the kitchen floor, looking solemn beside her upturned food bowl. The brown dog captured from the clinic's security footage, standing at the edge of the parking lot with her eyes turned east. The first real answer came from Irene Costello. Irene ran a small Italian bakery on Cumberland Street that had been her husband's before it was hers and hers for 22 years since. She was 69, short and solid with silver-streaked hair pinned behind her ears and a manner that treated silence as unnecessary waste. She recognized the brown dog immediately. She led Travis through the back of the bakery to the alley. A stainless steel bowl sat beside the door, licked clean. The dog had started appearing in November, she explained. Always before sunrise, always after Irene went back inside and closed the door. At first bread scraps, then proper food. "She never finishes it here," Irene said. "She eats part of it, and then she picks them up in her mouth and leaves." She folded her arms and looked at him directly. "A hungry dog eats where the food is. A mother carries it somewhere else." The second piece came from Kevin Tulk, a city maintenance worker who ran an early morning salt truck route through the harbor blocks. Kevin was broad-shouldered and deliberate in speech. A man who watched roads the way other people read. 3 weeks ago, he'd seen the brown dog cross the service road behind the decommissioned grain elevator on the waterfront. She'd had 2 puppies with her. He touched the photograph of Pepper. One of them had a white mark on the chest, an ear that didn't stand up. He looked up. Morning after that, she came through again. Only 1 puppy beside her. Travis stood in the cold beside Kevin's truck and let that sentence settle. Pepper hadn't simply wandered away from nothing. She'd been separated from a family that kept moving because stopping wasn't something survival allowed, and the brown dog had been going back and forth across those blocks, feeding 1 puppy and returning to another for weeks. Kevin drew the route on the back of an old receipt. Down the service road, behind the grain elevator, through a gap in the hoarding fence. He'd never followed closely. The truck engine changed her direction every time. Travis called the number on the posted demolition notice at the elevator gate. The site manager told him interior clearing was scheduled in 3 days. Equipment was already being staged nearby. He could walk the outer perimeter now. A weather alert on his phone that evening, ice storm tracking northeast across Lake Superior, reaching Thunder Bay before dawn, wind chills near -30. 3 days. He brought Pepper the next morning. The ice storm had passed but left a glaze across every surface. Near the gap in the hoarding fence that Kevin had described, Pepper stopped mid-stride. Her nose went up. Her body went still. Not the distracted stillness of a puppy encountering something interesting, but the stillness of an animal recognizing something older than anything she'd been taught. The brown dog appeared from behind the elevator's concrete base. Lean, damp-furred amber eyes moving from Pepper to Travis to the road behind her. She looked at the puppy for a long, careful moment. Then she found the gap in the hoarding and slipped through and stopped on the other side. She looked back. Travis checked the fence line until he found a wider section clear of wire. He unclipped Pepper's lead. "Go on." Pepper looked up at him. There was something in that look. A question about whether going forward meant he would still be there when she turned around. He lowered his hand so she could smell his fingers. "I'll be here." She ran after the brown dog. He followed at a distance, placing his boots carefully on bare concrete between ice patches. The elevator shed on the south wall had a rusted metal roof that had shed most of its ice. Salvaged pallets leaned against the wall on 3 sides, cutting the wind. A piece of foam insulation covered the floor of the space beneath the awning, dry in the middle, and damp only at the edges where the wind had found it. The brown dog stopped at the entrance. A puppy appeared from between 2 boards. Smaller than Pepper, and thinner, with a tan coat beginning to show the early markings of a dark saddle and ears that flopped outward from a head that seemed slightly too large for his frame. His eyes were brown and watchful, carrying the seriousness of a puppy who had learned too early that being left alone was a real possibility, and not just a temporary feeling. He would be called Finn. But in that moment he was simply the second life, the one the brown dog had kept returning to across busy streets and through bad weather and past the untouched bowl at the vet clinic, the one she couldn't carry forward and hadn't been willing to leave behind. Pepper lowered her head and moved toward him slowly. Finn leaned away. She made a small sound, barely a breath, more exhale than anything. Finn held still. She pressed her nose to his neck and his whole body changed. The tension left his legs, his tail came alive, and he shoved himself under her chin with such sudden force that both puppies stumbled backward into the insulation. They rolled together across the shelter floor, grabbing at ears and paws. A length of rope lay near the wall. Pepper grabbed one end, Finn seized the other. Their reunion looked, from outside, exactly like a disagreement. Travis set 2 bowls near the entrance and backed away. The brown dog stepped in front of Finn, shoulder angled toward Travis, muscles tight across her back. She wasn't aggressive. Her head was level. She was simply doing what she had been doing for weeks, positioning herself between her family and the uncertain thing. He sat down on the cold concrete outside the entrance, back partly turned, hands resting on his knees where she could see them. The wind moved through the elevator property. Metal creaked overhead. He sat for 22 minutes. He knew because he watched the second hand on his watch. 22 minutes felt like patience. It also felt exactly like all the minutes he'd spent sitting outside Hatch's kennel after Petawawa, counting time as though the numbers could still be negotiated with. He wasn't counting now. He was just staying in one place and letting that be enough. Finn moved first. He sniffed Travis's left boot, pulled back, stepped forward again, pressed his nose to the worn leather, and hurried back to his mother. She checked him from nose to tail. Then her weight shifted, and the muscles along her back released, not fully, but visibly. She stopped watching every direction at once. She wasn't ready to trust him, but she had stopped preparing to run from him. Travis came back each of the next 2 mornings. Food and water near the shed entrance, a dry blanket spread inside, a position outside where she could see his hands. He turned his face away when she ate. He didn't try to reduce the distance. Irene arrived on the second morning with a transport crate in the back of her old Pontiac. Kevin cleared broken glass and twisted wire from the fence gap with a broom he'd brought from his truck. Neither of them said much. The crate went near the shed entrance with its door tied open. They left the property and waited from beyond the fence. The morning of the third day, the demolition contractor's first truck arrived 20 minutes early. Its diesel engine coughed through the empty elevator walls, and Finn pressed flat against his mother's side. Travis had moved the food bowls just inside the crate. The brown dog circled it twice, sniffed the frame, backed away when the engine sounded again. Travis sat on the cold concrete and breathed slowly and did nothing. Every instinct he'd spent 20 years building told him to close the distance, to act, to have a plan. The old part of him built plans automatically. A blanket over the crate, barriers at each corner, 3 people moving at once. Every plan ended with the brown dog terrified. A dog forced into safety might survive it and lose the fragile belief that had brought her this far. He had seen that happen with working dogs badly handled. He was not going to do it here. He stayed still. The brown dog circled the crate a third time. She placed one front paw inside. Travis lowered his eyes. She stepped in fully, ate, turned, looked at the open yard behind her. He didn't move. She stood there for a moment, then stepped back out and returned to Finn. 20 minutes later, she went in again. This time she remained after the food was gone. Travis rose slowly. She tracked him with her eyes but held her position. He moved to the crate door and shifted it inward by a few centimeters, then opened it again. She shifted her weight but didn't retreat. He repeated it. On the third movement, he pressed the door until the latch touched the frame and stopped there. She stood and her breathing quickened. He released the door before the metal clicked and opened it all the way. She needed to know the choice was still hers. Several minutes passed. The brown dog lay down on the blanket. Travis returned to the door and closed it. The latch engaged. She didn't rise. Irene pressed his car keys into his palm without speaking. Kevin gathered the bowls and carried them toward the truck. Their silence felt like the right response. The kind that settles around something earned slowly and shouldn't be rushed past with noise. At home, Travis had set up the mudroom with rubber mats and a pen beside the yard door. He opened the crate from behind the gate and backed away. The brown dog emerged slowly, moving through the room with her nose close to the ground. She checked every corner, every doorway, the yard entrance, and the hallway beyond the gate. Only after she had catalogued the space did the set of her shoulders soften by any visible degree. He opened the second crate. Pepper came out at speed. Finn followed cautiously, and then discovered he was in an enclosed space with his sister, and let the caution go entirely. The brown dog touched both puppies with her nose, checked them once, and lay down. She let them climb over her. Irene had started calling her Dusk, the first morning she'd watched the dog disappear into the gray afternoon light beside the bakery alley. The name had followed her here, and it fit. The amber eyes, the way she moved through a space at the edge of things, present but not yet committed to staying. Travis said it quietly one afternoon at the pen gate. Dusk. Her eyes came to him. She didn't approach, but she didn't look away. The name stayed. Rebecca came to the house for the wellness check 3 days later. She moved slowly in the mudroom, let Dusk smell each instrument before using it, and worked through the examination without hurrying anything. All 3 dogs were healthy. Dusk's ribs still showed beneath her coat, but her eyes were clear and her heartbeat steady. Pepper dismantled Rebecca's medical bag with the focused attention of a dog who had found a productive use of her time. Finn stole a roll of measuring tape and ran under the bench with it. She's been in survival mode for months, Rebecca said, watching Dusk from the gate. She'll need time to learn that leaving the room doesn't mean losing them. In the weeks that followed, Dusk began resting alone near the yard door, then in the back room where morning light came through the window. When Pepper woke and found her gone, she went looking, confirmed she was there, and came back to Finn without any fuss. Rebecca explained later that Dusk was learning a thing she'd never had the chance to test, that she could leave and still find them safe when she returned. For months, being a mother had meant being present every single moment. Now she was discovering what it felt like to trust that the moment continued without her. Irene came every second day with supplies and opinions. One afternoon, Finn crawled under a kitchen chair, advanced until his head and shoulders were on the far side, and discovered he couldn't turn around or back out. He barked once, with great seriousness. He waited. He barked again, with increasing formal outrage. Irene lowered herself carefully beside the chair. Her silver-streaked hair fell loose from one pin. "You are not stuck," she told him. "You only think so because you went in one direction and expected to come out the same way." She lifted the chair slightly. Finn scrambled free and sat immediately on her shoe. "He needs someone patient," Travis said. "He needs someone who has spent 22 years making new problems out of solved ones," Irene said, scratching his ear, "and doesn't mind the work." The following week, Travis noticed a new food bowl in the bakery kitchen when he stopped by. Finn's name was written on a piece of masking tape along the rim, in Irene's handwriting. "Old stock," she said, without looking up from her work table. "Your handwriting is on it. I label a lot of things." Finn was sitting on her left foot. Travis signed the adoption papers the following week. Irene signed them the same day without being asked twice. For dusk, Rebecca connected Travis with a couple named Gerald and Florence Arsenault through a foster coordinator at the clinic. Gerald was 64, a retired geography teacher, tall and slow to speak in the way of someone who had spent decades waiting for the right words to arrive. Florence was 61, a former hospital ward nurse with warm eyes, and the particular attentiveness of a person trained to notice what someone couldn't bring themselves to say. Their dog had died the previous spring. They had waited before looking again, wanting time to make the choice, not grief. In the first meeting with dusk, Gerald and Florence sat at opposite ends of the room and didn't call to her. She remained near the wall and watched their hands. In the second meeting, Gerald held her lead without tension, while Florence knelt at a distance and let her circle and decide. In the third, Florence sat beside the mudroom window while Gerald stayed across the room. Dusk moved through the space, once, paused at the yard door as if reminding herself she still could, and turned back. She crossed the room slowly and lay down at Florence's feet, resting her chin across her shoe. Florence kept her hands folded in her lap for 2 full minutes before reaching down. Gerald said quietly to the coordinator, "We can come back as many times as she needs." That sentence told Travis what no paperwork could. The morning Dusk left, Travis placed the transport crate beside his truck with a familiar blanket spread inside. Dusk sniffed it, looked across the mudroom at Pepper and Finn behind the gate, and stepped inside without being lifted or guided. She turned once and lay down. He closed the door, the latch caught, she didn't rise. She knew the sound no longer meant she had lost control of her life. Pepper stood beside Travis on the porch as Gerald's car reached the end of Amelia Street and turned out of sight. She watched the empty road for a moment. Then she picked up his left glove from the porch step and began dragging it toward the front door, both front paws planted wide for leverage. He crouched and took it back. "You always know," he said, "when a moment is starting to get heavier than it needs to be." She tilted her head. One ear straight up now, one still slightly folded, and went for the glove again. Inside, 2 bowls sat along the kitchen wall where 3 had been. Travis looked at the empty space long enough to register it. Then he washed the 3rd bowl and put it in the cupboard. The room wasn't empty. It was rearranged. He knew where Dusk was going. He knew who would open the door, and what kind of light would come through the windows of a quieter house where nobody expected her to guard anything. He knew where Finn was, probably asleep across Irene's feet beneath the bakery table right now, while she told him firmly that he was a temporary arrangement. That evening he opened the bedside drawer. Hatch's canvas collar lay where it had always been. He picked it up for the first time since Petawawa, turned it in his hands, felt the worn stitching along the edges. Hatch had been a dog who moved without hesitation, who never spent energy on doubt. He wouldn't have understood the 14 months Travis had spent in this house holding still, as though stillness were its own kind of loyalty to what was gone. Travis set the collar on top of the dresser, Not put away, not thrown out, just moved somewhere he could see it. Pepper came in from the hallway and sat on his slipper. He reached down and scratched behind her good ear, the one that stood all the way up now. Spring came to Thunder Bay slowly, the way it always does, reluctant, negotiated, arriving in pieces over the course of weeks. The ice went out on Superior in late April, and by May the birch trees along Amelia Street were showing green and neighbors had begun leaving their doors open in the afternoons. On Sunday mornings, Irene's yard behind the bakery held all 3 dogs. Gerald and Florence brought Dusk through the back gate. Finn was already there. Pepper spun in circles until her own enthusiasm knocked Finn sideways. Dusk came in calmly, checked both puppies once with her nose, and settled beside Florence's chair, while the 2 younger dogs wore each other out over the same ball, despite there being 2 in the grass. Irene watched from her back steps and offered running commentary to anyone within earshot. Gerald stood at the fence with Travis, watching the 3 dogs in the morning light. 3 houses, 3 sets of bowls and beds and doors that opened every morning. None of them would sleep in the cold again. None would wait alone in an unheated shed. And when they came together on those Sunday mornings, they didn't look like a family that had been divided. They looked like a family large enough to belong in more than one place at once. Travis had spent 20 years believing the measure of a person was whether they arrived fast enough. Hatch's collar on the dresser was a reminder of what that belief cost when it met something it couldn't outrun. The 3 dogs, one across the city, one in a warm bakery kitchen, one standing now on the grass below looking up at him with a folded ear and a stolen glove in her mouth, were a slower lesson. Not every life worth reaching is one you save by moving. Some of them are ones you save by staying, by returning, morning after morning, to something that has learned to watch for you. There are miracles that arrive with ceremony, and there are the ones that find you in parking lots and back alleys. In the middle of something ordinary, you didn't plan to turn into anything at all. Travis Drummond had gone for coffee on a Tuesday in February and come home with something he hadn't known he was still capable of wanting. Not just a dog, but the proof that it was still possible to be the kind of person who stops, and waits, and comes back. If this story stayed with you today, share it with someone who could use a reminder that second chances don't announce themselves. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Paws of Grit for more stories of the loyalty that makes a house into a home. May your door always open to something worth returning to.